All right, welcome everybody. We are going to get inside of a Fostex speaker today, and this is a older model Fostex 6301B. Technically, according to Fostex, because it has the XLR in the back, this is either it says right here actually, it's a BE, which means it's got the XLR was put in there by Fostex. Sometimes you'll find these where other people have added it later on, but in the BE model, I do know from looking up in the schematic before that the BE has a preamp board with no transformer. That's the difference. There's a BX model that has a transformer. So 6301 B3E factory installed XLR. But what we are looking at today is this one says bad knob. And as you can see here, we don't even see a knob. Now, I believe I tested this out and it is working otherwise. We will give it a function test once we're done. But this is a really easy repair. Basically, we are going to replace the volume pot with a new one. It's a few dollar cheap piece. And the main reason for doing this video is so you can see the insides of one of these, and I can guarantee you, even if this might seem intimidating, replacing this, looking at this right here, you can do this. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. I've already done a bunch of them last week and decided this would be a good thing to document. So I'm going to go through the process so you can see the inside of one of these and then show you some things. But this is pretty basic stuff. I do have another more complicated one I might make a video on. We are not plugged in, okay? So I will talk multiple times about safety, maybe even make an electrical safety video, but we are not plugged in, and we can see that other than the bad knob, it looks like the power switch is working. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to show you about taking off this grill. This grill is punched in a little bit, and as long as I'm working on it, we're going to take this off. So I've got everything all here. I've got my soldering iron warming up, got my coffee, which is an essential part of this entire thing. So, starting off with this grill, you don't need to take off the grill. I'm taking off the grill because it might not be obvious here, but it's a little bent in from years of use and getting pushed around. So I'm going to bend it back and everything, and then I'm going to put it back on before I work, because I know myself, and I know that I will put something down here, and if I don't have this grill on here, something will go right through the cone of the speaker, and I will have wasted a lot of time. So these things are on here with just some adhesive that's in the center of the four corners of it. It's sort of like a hot glue kind of product or whatever. So just taking a small screwdriver here and getting under the edges to pry up. I'm actually going to set it down so I'm not holding the weight. And I almost stuck this through the suspension here. One should be careful. So, might not really read on camera, but you can see a little bit of the adhesive, and I can see this one has been off before. If you have an old one like this and it's been taken apart and there's not much adhesive, you can also hit those corners with some hot glue when you put this back together. So, don't need to document this, but I'm going to clean off this tape here from this mark with some alcohol. I'm going to go and take a couple of, hammers and just put this thing down flat and hammer this down, and then you can sort of bend things by hand. I'm going to sort of bend it out and reform it and all that. I'm going to go do that in the carpentry shop, and we're back. And freshly reformed. You may not be able to tell it very well, and it could easily get pushed back in again, but at least it's more or less the way that it belongs. And I cleaned off the tape gunk and, of course, got all kinds of the glue gunk on myself. And even here I see there's a little funny edge that I didn't notice, which will try and bend back so that it's straight. All these little things are going to help keep the grill formed the way it should be as much as possible. It's not a full remanufacture, but it's doing what it needs to be. And here you can sort of see the difference in the sides. I might have mentioned this, but the top and bottom edges are different from the side edges in that the side is a straight edge, and then the top and bottoms, you can see there's the curve. So there's more curve than there is on the sides. Point being that when you reinstall, there is a curve to the top and bottom that you can sort of see, and that tells you that that is the side where the curved part of the grill goes. So it goes right back in and basically sits in the glue. So boom, it or whatever that adhesive is, the glue, whatever, sits back in there, and now it is able to protect the speaker and looks a little bit better. So there we are. Okay, and now with that protection, now the next thing we'll tackle is actually this here volume pot. So little slug of espresso, and now we'll grab some tools to open this up. So there are 4 Phillips screws on the back. Those 4 screws come out, and then the back with the electronics and a bunch of stuff separates from the main part of the body with the speaker, the power switch, and the volume pot. So I don't know specifically what size Phillips this is. I think the Phillips that I'm using here is a number 2 end, which certainly is a size that will work for this. This has, oh, interesting. There normally should be insulation in here, which I do not see. So somebody has definitely been in here before. There would normally be like a white fiberglass insulation that goes back here. Well, this isn't a ported speaker. I think that's pretty much just to keep vibrations and things from being an issue. But back to what I was talking about, this being an extremely heavy for its size. Here's the speaker here attached to the front, but here is a nice big power transformer. That's where all the weight is. There's a lot of iron here and all that. This is a linear power supply. If you don't know what that means, as opposed to a switching power supply, it means that it uses a transformer, which is good because that gives you isolation from the mains, so there's some protection. Being a linear power supply rather than a switching power supply means that there is a big, heavy input power transformer that then sends the power to the main board and the amplifier and everything. So that's why it's heavy, and there is this thing here which can get in the way, and you need to be careful of because it'll want to fall off the table and stuff. You can also notice here, and let's see if I can angle this a little bit better. You'll notice here there's some kind of adhesive, maybe a hot glue or whatever. One thing that happens a lot with these, you see that there is a grommet here on the power cord. These grommets disappear a lot and stuff, and these power cords sometimes get yanked out. And this is, without the grommet, this is sharp metal, or sharp enough to be a problem. So oftentimes these will be fixed by having hot glue or something done around the power cord here in order to protect it so that it isn't getting yanked out or getting abraded and then shorting out on the body of the back of the speaker. Okay, so here is our volume pot. It is on a board. Okay, this is the way that Fostex does it. There are no other components, I believe. I thought maybe there was a capacitor on this board, and maybe I'm making that up from something else. But basically, there's a micro little connector here with the wires that come up. It's basically signal in and out. And this, having looked at the schematic, I know that this is off of the output of either the line in 1/4 inch or the board of the XLR in that has the preamp. So this is the output of the input section going into the power amp is where this is. It's a on the schematic it says it's a 50 K. I measured the new one, and that came up as 48K. So, you know, right there within the 5% or whatever. And just, let's see, let me turn this here so I can put this weight down. And I can tell this whole shaft is wiggling in here. This thing's about to completely fall apart. So this is definitely bad. Now, it's interesting. It kind of turns, although it feels funky. There's definitely something wrong in here. The rest of them that I repaired last week and the other ones that I had to repair have a problem which will be common. If you use a lot of these, you may have seen it, and that is where the shaft of the volume pot will just spin endlessly. And so you'll turn it up, get it to maximum, and then it'll keep going and go back down to 0 again. That happens to a lot of them, and that is internal workings of this pot breaking, and this is a $4 or so piece to replace, so it's well worth it to get a speaker back up and running and able to be rentable. So I'm going to undo a little cable twisting here. So before we go and repair this, the one other thing that I want to mention again, it's unplugged, okay? Electrical safety is always important. I know, having worked on these and also having seen the schematic and a few other things about them, I know that this is not a particularly high power device. I also know that this has been off for quite a while. So it is unlikely that these filter capacitors here in the power supply, it is unlikely that they are containing dangerous voltage. It's unlikely that there is stored voltage anywhere in here. However, as I always tell stagehands when I'm working on show site, everything in here can kill you. So you should assume that there could be power stored maybe in this transformer or in these capacitors. And so one should be careful with metal components and other things and fingers and other things sticking around. Highly unlikely there is dangerous voltage still in here. Small possibility. We should always proceed safely as though there is dangerous voltage unless we know otherwise. So right now I'm not going to do measurements and show you, but we could measure the output of the transformer, see if there's any residual voltage, and we could measure across the capacitors and see if there is residual voltage. I'm not going to, not worried about it. We're not really going to be touching that. And this that we are touching and working on here, this is all on the low 1 volt signal side, definitely not likely to be dangerous in any way. So just sort of the thought process about as we go into something, how dangerous could it be? What do we want to watch out for? And what do we want to be careful about? The other thing that I will mention, I talked about the power transformer and power coming in. This is connected directly to the line current coming in from the wall and goes through the power switch in here. So you can see sort of some heavy insulation and stuff here. And that's just because this is 120 volt line current and going through a switch, and it does should be, protected. You don't want these things shorting out and that sort of stuff as well. So this is one place where there could be, if we were testing this live plugged in, I would be a lot more careful about what I'm doing, because there could be power, and shorting there could cause us trouble. But right now we're just dealing with this hole here where the volume is and this volume pot. So we are going to take this board and we are going to desolder this old pot And what I will show you about that is, here's a new one. So you see there's these tabs on the side here, okay? These tabs and then these 4 pins. So the side tabs are soldered pretty well onto the board. This basically keeps them together. I don't know if I toned this out. I don't think that these side tabs, which are all here, I don't think they're connected to signal ground. They may be. Not sure off the top of my head. What I can tell you is that this pot works like many others in that it's basically a 3-terminal device. You see 4 terminals. One of them isn't connected or might be connected to the body as ground or something. But basically there's only 3 of them that are active in the circuit. One of them would be the input. The third one would be the full resistance, 50K, or in this case 48K that I measured. So it's always across all the windings of the pot. And then the middle one is the variable one that changes and goes from 0 to 48K as you turn this. So that's what this device is. It's fairly simple and designed for low level signals, 1 volt and all that. So that's why it can be small and doesn't have a huge amount of insulation or whatever, because it's not for high voltage. So we are going to desolder this from the board. So to do that, I'm not actually going to unplug stuff. I tried on one of the other ones. I did actually try to disconnect one of these connectors, and it was a giant pain, and it didn't really want to. So what I discovered is it was fairly easy to bring the speaker over to the vise here and just put this board in the vise. And actually the easy way that I did it here, I think I grabbed onto the shell, the threads, so to speak, of the pot, and then that way I could get to this, and I'm not sinking any heat away and stuff. So now I'm going to go down here, and I have a couple of things that are very handy for this sort of thing. One is desolder braid. This is 3 or 4 millimeters wide or something like this. I'm using that on those big tabs because that is the, well, the other braid that I have for doing the small signal pins is only 1 millimeter or 2 wide. And the problem I ran into with that is it just wasn't able to suck the solder off of the pin the way that I needed it to. So I have flux, solder flux. This is something that helps heat move. And so I'm putting some of that actually on all the pins. So it helps the heat to move and the old solder to flow, and basically helps us in what we are trying to do here. And I'm going to make sure this is nice and tight so it's not going to move too much. Okay. And I've got a not a very small tip, but just sort of a medium to small tip on a iron at 700 degrees. So, you know, this might be a little hot for sensitive components, but we're working on stuff here that's resistors and larger components and stuff. These aren't surface mounts. So I'm going to dive in here into getting the solder heated up. It's flowing rather nicely, actually, and then getting in here with the braid and sucking off as much. I know what you're thinking. I heard that. So I mentioned these little tabs. Oops. Mentioned these little tabs here. I don't know if in manufacture, if they bent them in or something like that, like to, you know, squeeze things in or to provide additional mechanical support. But I have found that once things are desoldered enough, yeah, I kind of bent them back out a little bit, and that helped release things. Now I still see that there's more. There's a good amount of solder on this on these tabs here. I think that pretty much is taking care of those big fat tabs. So now I'm grabbing the smaller 2mm or so, and now we're going to go over here to the other individual signal pins and start working on desoldering those. Okay. Now those, okay, so yeah, one of those big tabs, oh, and it looks like everything. So I just gave the board a little wiggle back and forth. Things were clearly moving. If you can see, it might be hard to see, but you can see the holes are open. You can see through them. Probably not easy to see on camera, but you can see that they're clear of solder, and you can see things through them. So, okay. All right. So nothing to salvage with this part. This is truly trash, and so into the trash it goes. Now then, the new one. Okay, very simple. The only trick with the new one is that the tabs go into the sides, and then oh my god, that fits in. I didn't have to mangle or do anything. So when I've had to do these before, sometimes I've had to squeeze the tabs in a little bit to get them into those holes. Other times I've had an individual pin or something here that didn't want to go right back into its hole. So hey, that worked out. That sucker went right back in there. Now I've got a clean solder iron, fresh solder. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is pushing that down to make sure that's all the way in. And it doesn't want to stay in. So what I'm going to do is, actually the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use the iron to push it down and hold it in while I'm there. Okay, and now it's already getting the flux hot and fresh solder and lots of it. And now I am going to look very closely here by moving my vise around so I can get this in my view. And now I'm just looking for any solder bridges. It doesn't look like there are any, but looking to make sure that the pins, the 4 pins, none of them are bridged with any solder. And it looks like they're not, although maybe. No, I think that's just flux and stuff. Okay, which brings me to the next thing, which is I'm going to take a little rag here, and I've got some isopropyl alcohol, and now I'm going to clean that flux off of the board. Okay, it's not the cleanest that there ever was. I don't really need it to be, don't need it to be super clean. If I did, I might take a Q-tip or something else and get in here more. But what I am going to do, for giggles and because you're watching me, is I'm going to take the meter and double check that I don't have any shorts. I like to do things twice once, as they say. I don't know, I had somebody say that to me once. I know it's a silly statement. So, okay, got our continuity meter here, and I'm going to go and just check between these pins. Just make sure that nothing is shorted. Okay, first pin. Okay. And of course the tabs, which are all part of the body, are shorted to each other, which makes sense. Okay, so I definitely did not bridge any of those pads, which is good. All right. And we need a swig of espresso. Okay, so that's the electrical part of this. Honestly, that's one of the easiest repairs that you're going to do for this, and it's a fairly easy part of this. Now, the reassembly, this is where there's a couple of little things, and as I was doing these before, I noticed something, so I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, the board goes a specific way, okay? If you turn the volume knob, imagine that, it's there. Turning counterclockwise turns it down, turning clockwise turns it up. Okay, well, the zero position, the turn down position, also if you see the shaft on this, it's a half round. Okay, so you've got, it's round on one side, flat on the other. And that is because the actual indicator knob that goes on there, goes on one way. And so I happen to know from doing these previously that you need to have this notch here in the top. I use that sort of an arrow. That tells me that pointing to 0 should be down this way. So the board needs to go in this way. If you put it in this way with the wires oriented up here and the connector oriented up here, then your 0 point would actually be pointing up at like 1 o'clock or something, which, talking about this and things are on their side and all that, there's, I understand the directions may not make sense. But the bottom line is that means that the connectors here need to be oriented towards the bottom of the speaker. And I'm actually going to be stealing the volume knob from another speaker that needs repair here, but that volume knob will be going on here, and you see it's at 0 right now, and that's the whole point. You need to orient the board this way with the wires going down in order to have the proper orientation of the speaker. And now to reinstall this, and this is where things get a little interesting, to reinstall this we have a nut and a washer that go over the shaft when this goes through the hole. So now I'll insert this into the hole here. Okay, and now you can see there's the shaft poking out, and it is pointing more or less down at 0, which you may or may not notice, but you can sort of see the word volume here. This one's been around the block so much that the indicating numbers have started to wear off. I wonder when we did buy this. This goes way back. But at any rate, so washer goes down. And this is the fun part. Then the nut goes down. Okay, now, I have gone through a number of different ways of trying to secure this nut. And it's not easy with pliers, which is what I have been using, some needle nose and stuff. What happens is it wants to get cross-threaded really easily. So what I'm doing right now is I'm visually trying to get this on here straight and flat, and just trying to get like the first start of the threads by nudging it with this little screwdriver. And this is really the trick here, because it's really easy to get it cross-threaded, and so it takes a little bit of work to get it properly threaded. Now, what I did is I found a socket, a 7/16 socket. And this is the right size for that nut. And I'm using it without any kind of handle or anything because there's this shaft here and things could get in the way. So by doing it like this, I can drop it on here. Okay, and already I can feel, I'm going back and forth, already I can feel that it was a little cross-threaded. Oh, feels like, yes, it's working. There we go. Okay. So now I don't need to support the board with my hand anymore, although, let's see, I'm looking at the angle. It looks like the 0 position is in a good position. I am going to keep the board from rotating as I put a little bit more force and torque on this. Good. That holds it down. Okay. Now we have a properly functioning volume pot here. So this doesn't have the insulation that would normally go back in. So basically at this point, everything else is in here and that. I'm going to place this back in. One thing to watch out for, when I put these back, the high voltage cable coming in, you know, where the wires go to the transformer on the input and that, have gotten one caught around where this little stud is, and so had a little difficulty getting it closed and had to go move that out of the way. However, this feels like this is right in the right position at the moment. So let me get some screws here. And let's see if I can do this. All right. Okay, so now we've got this restored. I am going to pull that other volume knob cap off and put this on shortly. However, let's do our function test. Looks like already maybe a little pressure was applied to that grill, but that's just what happens after time with these things. There's only so much you can do, and it's not going to prevent it from going back out on shows. If it works, it works. All right, so now switch is off. Okay, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to be careful about touching this thing because if there is a short to the metal case, I don't want to get shocked. Again, this is not a super high voltage device or anything. So the worst thing that would probably happen, and of course there's always, and then it got worse. The worst thing that could probably happen was I would get a nasty jolt, and but we're going to try and avoid all that. And of course, the other thing we want to watch out for when we plug things in is funny sounds, smells, and smoke. There's the old joke, letting the smoke out, which you may or may not have heard. But we're going to watch out for that. So I have a power strip over here on the side of the workbench, and without bouncing things around connected to hot soldering irons, I'm going to come over here. So this gives us one level of isolation and protection. There's a circuit breaker on this. In addition, the way that everything's powered in the repair room here, there's a couple of circuit breakers. So we do have some protection in case things go weird. But we are going to turn this to the right polarization, plug it in. Okay, good sign, nothing went pop. Okay, and we turn it on, and we have a power LED. Let's see. Oh, can you even see that on this camera? There we go, power LED. And I didn't get shocked, so that's great. Things are good. So now we are going to do a function test. So I am going to take my phone, and because it is made by a fruit-based company that refuses to put headphone jacks on stuff, I will plug in my Lightning to headphone jack adapter, and then plug into the XLR here and bring up music. And yes, we have Tedeschi Trucks Band, which I recently downloaded one of their albums because they're such a big deal lately, and we're turned all the way up. And let's see what happens. Oh, look at that. Listen to that. There we go. 35 watts or so of Fostex goodness. I say 35 watts because I looked up the amplifier chip. I'm not totally sure. What does Fostex say these things are anyways? 33 watts. Okay, so they basically rate it at what the op amp does, which the manufacturer's data sheet says 32 watts. So there you go. They're giving you they're rounding up, which is not surprising for speaker manufacturers. And one thing that I did notice when looking up that op amp is that 32 watts is an RMS program rating. The op amp in here that does the amplification is actually rated for 50 watts peak. So that's I didn't do the 1.7 math off the top of my head, but converting RMS to peak, that sounds about right. 35 watts RMS, 50 peak, maybe something like that. Anyways, it's close. Okay, so now we're going to unplug and make it safe again. And the last thing we'll do is this knob, which if we were working on this originally, it's a simple small screwdriver, get under here, and then just pull this up, and it literally pops off. Similar with the power button, you can just pull off the cap on that. Sometimes those go missing, so you can buy replacement caps there. So I will be ordering another volume knob to repair that other one, but that one has other issues, which will make for a very good video at some point. But looking at this and the flat side and the zero, boom, this goes on. And as we can see now, we have an indicator. If I was really cheeky, I would paint a little 11 here. So this one can go to 11. But right now, it does what it needs to do. And so the last thing that I'm going to do after signing off is go into the inventory control system, look up this barcode, put this back into availability, and then go put it back on the shelf, which is one of the most satisfying things about this entire process, is that this now can go back out for rental. It is fully functional. So hopefully you learned something, and if not, well, you know, I tried. So thank you for checking it out. Like the video, comment, definitely comment. If you saw me do something that you think is completely wrong or dangerous or whatever, or if I said something that you know is just a bunch of BS or something, do call me out on it, because I want to learn. Number one, I am not afraid to learn something new because I don't know everything. And number two, you know, maybe both of us can learn something if we have a dialogue or whatever. So yeah, thanks for tuning in for this, and maybe within the next few weeks I might get this other speaker out here and work on this. And we got a couple other things. Maybe we were just talking around the shop about things that we could put on video, so we might do I don't know, let me know if you like this, but we might do some Yamaha console opening up stuff, some diagnostic, other more complicated diagnostic stuff, and then I've got a bunch of cable and other stuff around here. I could get into making cable and things that are maybe not quite so interesting, but, you know, happy to get into whatever. So I think I've said enough. I'm going to push the stop button now. Thank you.